Hello, George. I should probably explain why I felt motivated to create this video. Certain meeting of the minds between you and me in really two spheres. One is the general sphere that you are the most plain-spoken, truth-telling medical leader that we had, and there were times when that was downright useful. I can just give a couple of examples that stick in my mind forever. You once mentioned that it was quite remarkable that I still had more literature citations than anyone else in our department. And I was kind of amused by that word "still," but yeah, you were the only one who ever mentioned that. And so just to be more specific about that, in 2018, so I can just show you, like, this is a curve of my the citations to my publications, and in 2018 we'll reach 20,000 citations. Now, if you were still going to be here in 2018, I'm sure you would be part of our celebrating that, because it was the kind of thing that you noticed. There also was a brief period of time where I was a bit distracted in a positive way by external forces, and you were the only person who seemed to notice that positive distraction. And anyway, it was useful to me that you mentioned that. And when I think of general philosophical things, the idea, you've probably heard the quotation that it takes a long time to grow young. In a sense, I feel that's what's happening to me, and I think you kind of uniquely understand that sort of thing in life. So that in a general way made me feel a kind of kinship bond to you. More specifically was ISTAT, point of care testing kit that would tell you potassium, urea nitrogen, creatinine. I realized today it's possible that Michelle Hales and I were interested in that before you were. You came here in '97, and our main activities were relating to ISTAT and international disaster relief, post-earthquake, kidney failure, assessing patients who had been crushed under collapsed buildings. We were very excited about the potential of ISTAT as a way to triage patients who did or did not have kidney failure following building collapse. And in 1992, Michelle Hales, who was sort of my right-hand person between 1987 and 2007, almost flew to India that had just had a major earthquake with a lot of ISTAT equipment, And the only thing that stopped us is we had no invitation, and we figured she would just get lost in the system and probably not be able to apply the iStat technology to patients there in the chaos of a post-earthquake scenario. I can show you some pictures. This is what she looked like at that time in about '92. This is what, this is a picture of me and her 10 years later. The iStat, the clinical chemistry side of our life, was not very long lasting. It probably, that interest persisted throughout the '90s and probably barely overlapped with your arrival here. But I don't remember ever discussing it with you. Perhaps Michelle did. I don't know, but I know that you were quite interested and still are in point-of-care testing, and it's just kind of amusing the fact that you and I shared this interest, and I bet very few people would know that fact about the two of us. So, as you know, I've written a poem, and I'm going to read that poem Tuesday night at our Breath in Poetry session at the Nook Cafe. But that's just a few hours before you leave on your big trip. So I thought it's better probably if I read the poem for you in this video. And then we'll also do a video of the session at the Nook, and you know, I can let you see that as well. But I think this probably is a better time for me to read the poem for you. And the poem is called Filterless Chemistry and George C. And filterless has to do with that plain-spoken, truth-telling attribute that you had that I found so very useful, and other people also mentioned that. I must say that your retirement came as a tremendous surprise to me and the other people in anatomical pathology. We only knew about it on the day of, so I didn't have very long to write this poem. Here it is. Filterless Chemistry and George C. In chemistry we know filters well, but about George C. this we can tell that his conversations were filterless. Fun without limit and humor best. Really, those are the very best minds that say what they think every time, no holding back, because what is the point? There are just all those truths that need to be articulated. Such a generous man who gave us books to read. The good times with him one could never exceed. His wry wit, keen intellect, and papers prolific were balanced by those rare times he fell asleep in public. We will miss you a lot, Dr. George C. You brought wisdom and joy to chemistry. The machines will also miss you, Dr. C. They will be our bosses eventually. They and we have learned lots from you about quality. Now they plot a quality technological singularity. The machine's plan of world domination involves full cooperation with laboratory concision. Dr. C's company, you see, is called Laboratory Concision. So anyway, that's the poem, George, and I hope you like it. It does, I guess, show that I can write poetry under some time pressure. And I enjoyed writing it. I did go to your retirement for that 30-minute segment that we have the video of just following this. But unfortunately, there just wasn't time for me to read the poem actually there. So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful trip. I wish you well from here on out, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. And thanks for letting me play a small role in your retirement celebration. Congratulations all around, and I wish you the very best for the future. Thanks very much. And now will come the 30-minute segment of your retirement that I captured. Okay, thanks very much. Take care.
So Carol, when I came here about 20 years ago, I found that her mind was so open, and every time we'd go to a meeting, she would absorb 3 times what I would learn. and she would bring it back, and she would repackage the material so that the medical technologists at University of Alberta Hospital could use it more easily. And it's too bad. I invited Tammy Hofer. Now I'm going to be like Trump. Is Tammy Hofer here? Where is she? Maybe I didn't invite her. Well, he's so easy. I'll tell you later. So she and both Tammy and Carol would go to meetings, and they would come back with huge amount of spirit, and they would transform what was taught into something that was very useful. And then we would feed it back to these men, sadly men. I have to tell you, I'm multi-gender, multi-culture, okay? I'll tell you more, I got the books, okay? and she did terrifically. So now the new people who are using these procedures, they are able to much better figure out if it's acceptable or not. And Vanessa is not here, right? Vanessa?
No, she's on vacation.
Yeah, that's pathetic. So next Tuesday, if you see Vanessa, just say, "You're pathetic." Okay. Now, so a knowledge worker is someone who works at their desk, and you never know if they're working or not. Like, I'm a knowledge worker, and for the last however many years, people never knew what I did or whether I'd accomplished anything. And it's been a great gig, okay? It's been fantastic. And sometimes when I listen to the guys here, they think I did something, but then I wonder how effective I have been. But Carol is irreplaceable. Over the 20 years that I've known her, she's got better and better and better and better. Her co-workers describe her as being dedicated, a very strong worker, and she is kind and patient, and she never complains. So at 6:30 in the morning, she's at work. She leaves about 3 o'clock. She's quiet, she's highly professional, and she is such a great role model for everyone. So it makes me very happy to be able to share the podium with Carol, introduce her, and tell her how proud I am of all of her work here, but I'm more proud of how she's going to be hawking systems called pain and other things, and we're going to make a ton of money, Carol. We're going to have some great meals at church. Okay? So I'm hoping we will be able to declare a bonus even this year. All right. So, Carol, do you want to come up and say a few words?
Thanks, George, for all the good things you had to say. And I'd like to thank everybody who came out to help us celebrate this day. It's with very mixed emotions that I am retiring. I've always loved my job, and I'm sure Tuesday morning when I walk out the door is going to be probably one of the hardest days of my life. Once again, thank you. As George said, I'm not much one for talking, so thanks again.
Yeah, I'm always hunting on the internet. So, alcohol is really bad, as you know. So I've put this in critical places where people who drink too much Civic beer and other things can notice. So this one is called Dear Alcohol, we had a deal. You were to make me funnier, sexier, more intelligent, and a better dancer. I saw the video. We need to talk. I've only had one. Okay.
Thank you, George and Carol. So, George, would you like to take a seat? Because I don't know if you want to stand for all of it.
Can I get a beer?
Yes. Okay, so we'll wait until George gets a beer.
Got one here.
Okay. So I've been asked to speak a little bit about George, and I have to warn you that I'm a crier. So I have a lot of tissues. I tend to cry at movies and commercials, everything. So just to warn you, because I probably will, because even yesterday thinking about this, I was already tearing up. So I have to tell you, yes, I have to tell you that I don't know too much about George's life outside of work, and that's not because he only works, it's because I should have done more research, but get the dirty secrets. But what I can tell you is that you know, and I'm sure that all of you have people who you think about, whose articles you have read, or names that pop into your mind that you think, wow, that guy must be really good. So you've never met them, or but you've read all of their articles, or you've heard about them in other ways, and you think that this guy is really brilliant. And so with George, whether, I think we all realize, but maybe some of us don't, but he is actually one of those people. So to us, he's George, but if you talk to other people in the field who've never met him, you tell them that you work with George Cembrowski, and their face changes like, oh wow. So George has clearly accomplished a lot in his career, not just here in Edmonton, but elsewhere. And so I can just tell you a little bit about what he did before he got here, although I think many of you know, those of you who have worked with him. But so he did his BSc in chemistry here at the University of Alberta. And then he moved to a little town called Madison, which is the capital of Wisconsin, where he did his PhD in clinical laboratory science, and he minored in computer science. And Madison is very dear to my heart, because I did my PhD there too, so that's actually really cool. And then he came back to Alberta, where he completed his MD, and he did a combination of anatomic pathology and clinical pathology. And then after that, he went back to the States. He worked for the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania for a number of years, where he was director of the Stat Lab and also assistant professor in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. Then after a while, I guess he found more stimulation elsewhere, and he moved to Minneapolis, where he became lab director of the Park Nicollet Clinic and also a clinical assistant professor at the University of Minnesota. And then he came back here to Alberta, where he has since been a professor at the University of Alberta and director of medical biochemistry here in Edmonton. So he has clearly accomplished a lot in his career and in a number of different places, which I think is part of the reason why I feel always very stimulated when I talk with him, because I think he brings all of this experience from so many different places and then combines that to come up with this really unique way of looking at things. I guess another record of his accomplishments is he has over 100 articles published, peer-reviewed articles, and more than 200 presentation abstracts. So again, in the world of science, that's a huge accomplishment as well. And his CV, which I got from Amber today, is, I think it's something like 35 pages long, which again speaks to his many professional accomplishments in work. But I think all of us, again, most of us know him not just for all of the great knowledge that he has brought to Alberta Health Services in the years that he's worked with us, but in the many ways that he has touched us personally. So I actually asked some people about their fondest memory of George, and so I would like to read a couple. I don't have time to read every memory that I received, because I received quite a lot, but I thought I would read a couple, and maybe I'll just start with my own personal one, which was, I was at a conference. I was a trainee at Hopkins. I think I was in my second year, and I very much wanted to come back to Canada after I finished my training. That was always my goal, to come back to Canada. And so I attended the ACC, and my director at the time, he had some Canadian contacts, so I asked him to introduce me to them, which he did. George wasn't one of them, but so I was very feverishly trying to hand out my business cards with the hope that eventually I'll hand out enough that I'll be able to land a job somehow through all those contacts. And so I was, I think I was at the poster of Dan Holmes, who's a clinical biochemist, and George came by. Not to talk to me, but to talk to Dan, who's a good colleague of his. And so then I kind of tried to push my business card to George as well, having learned things in Canada as well. And well, I'm going to imitate you, but it's I mean it in kindness. So I don't know. So he eventually kind of accepted my business card, although I could tell that he didn't really want to do that. And so then I went home back to Baltimore, and I was looking for jobs online, and eventually this job in Edmonton came up, and I applied to it. I sent all of my materials into a generic human resources email, and I didn't hear anything back. And then I think a couple of weeks later, I received an email from George asking if I was still interested in coming back to Canada, and saying that they have an opening here in Edmonton, and that I should send him my CV so he can start it. And I was just... Told you I would cry. I was very, very touched that out of all the people that he came across at a conference, he would remember me. And now here I am. 4 years later. So anyway, that's you know, for me that was very life-changing, obviously. So. Okay, so now I would like like to read a couple of other memories from other people, and I can tell you now, I will tear up with some of them as well because they're very touching. And I won't say who sent the memories, so George can guess. I think maybe sometimes it will be more obvious, sometimes less. So the first person, he always advocated for residents and took them on consultation visits and to conferences. And at the conferences, especially at AACC, he always ensured we were fed and watered very well. I thought it was, so same person, I thought it was the coolest thing ever that after teaching me about Westgard rules, we happened to go to a meeting, and then before I know it, he's introducing me to Dr. Westgard. As a junior resident, I was very impressed. Second person, I have a lot of memories, but I think the most important are his taking care of his people, meaning all of you and those of us he has brought into this wonderful group of people. He always had time to see me and connected me to people he wanted me to work with and get to know. He's probably the biggest reason I got involved with Point of Care and worked with so many people there through the years. He was always a coach and mentor for me. He challenged me to be on my toes and allowed me to run things by him when I needed advice. He's also part of the reason I am working for Company X and on Product X. As many years ago, when they first talked to him about it, he said to me, "Go work for that company and sell that new instrument." He then was one of my references. He is now starting a new chapter in his life, and I know we will still be a part of that as we won't lose touch. While we won't see him every day, he will pick up the phone and make random calls as he has always done. So I just want to wish him well. Okay. Third person. The day I first met Dr. George Cembrowski is still vivid in my memory, even though it was 25 years ago. I have no issue with creating that timeline since George retires ceremonially today, and I will retire in January, so our respective ages are quite transparent. I'm pretty sure it was ASCP hosting their annual conference in New Orleans, and I was inevitably the Canadian representative for Company Y at the conference. One day, this very tall man loomed in front of me at our exhibit booth, and recognizing the small Canadian flag on my name tag, proceeded to extract an invitation from me for a riverboat dinner cruise. George already had an invitation from the US side of our company, being a University of Pennsylvania customer at that time, but he had a new acquaintance in tow from Quebec for whom he was brokering a Canadian invitation. I was able to make this happen, and from that day, at every ASCP or AACC meeting, George and I would run into one another, share a coffee or lunch, and catch up. To this day, when my phone rings, I always check first to see if it is George, wondering what new and unusual inquiry he has for me, most likely with an audience of no less than 3 to 5 colleagues over the speakerphone. George has always kept me on my toes professionally, as I'm sure most of you can relate. And since the very beginning of our friendship, George has shared his immense knowledge and an irrepressible curiosity and the vagaries of biochemistry, pre-analytics, and analytics and post-analytics with me at whichever company I was working for at that time. Much appreciated. George, I wish you a bright, relaxed future of retirement, but I sincerely doubt that retirement will slow you down at all. All the best. Okay, person number 4. My favorite memory of Dr. Cembrowski was when he came to do a site visit. I had just started my role as a Tech 2, and I was feeling very overwhelmed. He took the time to get to know me and was genuinely interested in my background and my opinions. He made me feel at ease and that my opinion counted. He took me under his wing, and I learned so much from him in just a few hours. I valued the time he spent with me that day, along with his candor and unique sense of humor. I thank him for making me feel comfortable and a part of the larger team. Next person. In 1998, I was a very sick puppy. Hair falling out, dry skin, weight gain, sweating all the time, so tired. I went to doctor after doctor and kept getting told I was depressed. It was George who finally diagnosed me as hypothyroid and got me in to see an endocrinologist who diagnosed me with Hashimoto's. Without George, who knows how much longer I would have had to suffer. Okay, next person. I think my favorite memory about George is how no one is ever just an employee. He treats everyone as equals, he demands everyone do the best in their job and always think for themselves, not just think within the confines of their job description. He empowers people to do more, to participate and to do things that make them uncomfortable. While he challenges each person to be their best, he takes the time to really know them as individuals, and when needed, he is there to help. We had a very beloved member in point of care nursing who ultimately passed away from cancer. George not only visited her in the hospital, but up until the day she died, he continually challenged her. Mary was a computer whiz and the ultimate data miner, and this was a big part of her personality and her world. George knew this, and he kept her mind busy while her body failed. He went above and beyond. There are not many leaders who would go to this length for an employee, but as I mentioned before, George never thinks of anyone as a number. We're all individual people that he wants to see succeed. We will all miss you in your wacky, eccentric ways. Thank you for all you have done. Okay, and two more. So one of my favorite moments with Dr. Cembrowski happened when I showed him the safe Pico syringe with the mixing ball inside it. He said, "This is simply brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?" Every conversation with George, and I have had many, is like playing a chess game, struggling to think 7 moves ahead with 12 options for every move. It is stimulating, confusing, motivating, frustrating, and challenging, but above all, it is always a treasured learning experience, and it always makes my day. Okay, and the last one, this one is a funny one, so the tears are almost done. A memory of George, wow, there are so many. However, there is one that has stuck with me. George, as you know, is a lover of anything in print like old books and comics. About 15 years ago, I was clearing things out of the Saskatchewan family farm.
Keep going.
Sorry, George, I have to finish the story. But there's a nice ending to it. And I'm Catholic too, so I'm allowed to. Okay, about 15 years ago, I was clearing things out of the Saskatchewan family farm as my parents prepared to move off after more than 55 years. In one of the shacks in the yard was a box of old comics. I told George about this, and he eagerly offered to pay me a small sum for them. I said, "Sure," and brought them in. A week or so later, George told me that most of the material was treasure chest comics, published by a Catholic organization in the US. He asked if I was trying to convert him to Catholicism. By the way, I was unsure of the type of comics in the box, really. You know how it goes, buyer beware. Yes, George is provocative, unpredictable, and off the wall at times, but I will also remember him for his generosity. He cared deeply for the lab staff. Many technologists, lab scientists, and residents over the years were recipients of this generosity by getting their way paid to conferences like AACC. All the best in the future, George. Keep giving them hell. So I want to just finish by saying that I think from all of this, it's very clear that Dr. Cembrowski has really had a very spectacular career in laboratory medicine. He has really paved the way in lab medicine for a lot of innovation, a lot of new approaches to the way that we do things. But it's also very clear that in addition to lab medicine, the people that he worked with were equally important to him. And so, George, I think on behalf of everyone, I would like to say that and emphasize that today is a celebration. We're not saying goodbye because we all expect to keep in touch with you and have stimulating discussions and conversations in the future. And so for now, we just come here, we party, we celebrate your work, your accomplishments, and who you are. And from, I guess, Monday or Tuesday onwards, we will still be working with you, just in a different context.
Of course, if you have ADD and you're getting your picture taken with all the beautiful phlebotomists all morning, when do you put your talk together? And it was so fantastic. I'm trying to figure out who's whom. Don Legat was the one who sold me those bogus comic books. Once when I was a kid, we ran into an abandoned farmhouse and they had Batmans and Supermans and also fighting the Yellow Menace and all kinds of different things. And I thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to make thousands of dollars on beautiful semi-mint comic books. And what did I get? I was born a Catholic. I'm a Catholic, okay? So, not impressive. Totally boring. Totally... It was bad. It was really bad. And I know he knew what was in that box. So the fact that he said he didn't know, no, that's wrong. Hold on. I had some stuff written down. Okay. So, I've been here 20 years. Over the last 2 or 3 months now, I've had early morning awakening. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm up for 2 or 3 hours just trying to figure out what's going on. I'm thinking it's just a job transition, and it seems very stressful, and I know eventually things will come to some equilibrium. I know that I derive so much positive from coming to work, and I know I will miss all of you, and it's sad. So today, I was wondering what to do this morning, and I figured my job is just to go around and give hugs to people, and it was really great. It was wonderful. It was, but then right at the last moment, someone says, "I don't know you." I said, "Don't worry." Hug her. I just said, it's my last day. And she was probably thinking I'm crazy, right? Which is really true. I am crazy, and everybody knows that I am crazy. So we did lots of pictures, and a few times when there was one woman whose son died in a car accident 7 years ago, so we just started recollecting, and we're both sad and happy at the same time. It's good to get that close, and I will remember our conversation for a long time. So I'm trying to read my writing here. Okay, so I'm starting several businesses. And before I started the businesses, I took a few sort of personnel inventory courses. I did one for entrepreneurism. So I found out that my major skill is that I'm disruptive, okay? And an example of the disruption is this summer, I don't know when it was, but Anna and I were at a course on how do you handle disruptive physicians. So I sat with Anna right in the middle seat of the front row, and Michael Mengel, my chair, came in, as well as Carolyn O'Hara, and they all pointed to the disruptive physician. And then what I wanted to do right away, and which I did, I said, disruption is good. But it was so weird. All these people are being trained to say, you should not be disruptive, you should be accepting of the system. It's almost like Stepford Wives. I mean, the worst example possible. We make sure that any commission who is somewhat disruptive, we will do some lobotomy or something. So I'm generally protesting this, and I'm sure Michael is being embarrassed, but I don't care much. Because you have to, in a way, say, we will change the system, we are dissatisfied with what's going on, we will foment revolution. Michael doesn't buy that. I also do it in banks as well. If you guys, where you're talking to the teller and you're telling him that the bank president makes 500 times more than you do, and yes, I don't care, I will ask for your service no matter what, even if it's a piddly little thing, I'm going to do it because you're not going to make more money off of me, right? And then, but they all know that they'll get fired if they basically say, let's revolt.